Good evening, dear listener, wherever you are right now. Allow this moment to slow down naturally. There is nothing you need to prepare for, nothing you need to hold together, nothing you need to resolve before the night can continue. You have arrived at a quiet place, one where words are not meant to demand attention, but to gently carry you forward. If your eyes are open, let them soften without effort. If they are closed, simply notice the weight of your body being supported, the steady surface beneath you, the quiet reassurance that you do not need to stay alert in order to be safe. Tonight, we are going to move slowly into one of the oldest stories in the Bible, a story that speaks about unity, pride, silence, and the quiet moment when human voices began to separate from one another. This is the story of the Tower of Babel, but we will not approach it as a warning or a lesson to analyze. We will approach it as a night story. Something to rest inside, something to feel rather than understand, allowing its rhythm to calm the mind and its imagery to settle the body. Long before cities were many and nations were scattered, the Bible describes a time when humanity lived close together, sharing the same land, to some work, and the same language. People spoke with one voice. Words flowed easily from one person to another without confusion or misunderstanding. Communication did not require effort. There was no need to explain meaning repeatedly or to clarify intention. When someone spoke, they were understood. When someone listened, they knew what was being said. This shared language created a sense of closeness, a feeling that the world was small enough to be held in common. Imagine that world slowly, without hurry. Wide open plains stretching beneath a generous sky. Communities moving together, working together, speaking freely. Voices blending into one continuous sound, familiar and reassuring. In such a place, there was comfort in sameness, a shared rhythm of life, a sense that nothing stood between one person and another. The night, too, would have sounded different then. Conversations drifting softly into the darkness, words understood without effort, silence shared rather than feared. As time passed, people began to settle in one place. They no longer moved as often. They built homes that stayed. They shaped bricks from clay, baked them in fire, and discovered that what they created with their hands could endure. This discovery changed how they saw themselves. What begins as cooperation can slowly become confidence, and confidence, when left unchecked, can harden into something else. The people said to one another, calmly at first, almost casually, that they should build a city, a place that would not be temporary, a place that would last. And at the center of that city, they imagined a tower, not just any tower, but one that would rise higher than anything they had built before, a structure that would stretch upward, visible from far away, touching the sky itself. The desire behind this was quiet, but powerful. They wanted to make a name for themselves. They wanted to ensure that they would not be scattered. They wanted permanence, security, recognition. This was not spoken with shouting or anger. It was spoken with shared agreement, with a unified voice. Everyone understood. Everyone consented. Everyone moved together toward the same goal. As the tower began to rise, stone by stone, brick by brick, there was a sense of momentum. Progress feels intoxicating when it is shared. Each layer added to the one before it, each day's work confirming the belief that nothing was beyond reach. The tower was not built in haste, but in steady repetition, the kind that slowly reshapes identity. The higher it grew, the smaller the ground below seemed to become. At night, when the work paused, the tower would still be there, looming quietly against the dark sky, a reminder of human effort, a symbol of shared ambition. Perhaps people lay down to sleep beneath it, feeling pride in what they were creating together, feeling safe in the strength of their unity, unaware that something subtle was already shifting beneath the surface. The Bible tells us that God looked upon this city and this tower, not with surprise, not with confusion, but with understanding. He saw not just the structure, but the intention behind it. He saw a unity built not around trust in him, but around fear of being scattered. A desire to secure identity through height, permanence, and self-made legacy. And so, quietly, without thunder or destruction, something changed. God did not tear the tower down with fire. He did not break the bricks or scatter the city overnight. Instead, he touched something far more intimate and far more powerful. Language, the very thing that had united them so easily. Suddenly, words no longer landed the same way. Sentences no longer carried shared meaning. Voices that had once flowed together now passed each other without understanding. Confusion entered where clarity had lived, not violently, but gently, unmistakably. People spoke, but meaning slipped away. Familiar sounds no longer connected hearts. This moment did not arrive with chaos at first. It arrived with pause, with hesitation, with the quiet realization that something essential had shifted. Communication once effortless, now required strain. The unity that had felt so solid began to loosen. Not because people wanted division, but because understanding had become difficult. And as confusion grew, movement followed. People drifted apart, not in anger, but in necessity. They gathered with those they could understand. They traveled outward. The city slowly emptied. The tower, unfinished, stood as a silent witness to what had been attempted and what had changed. Tonight, we will stay with this story gently. We will explore what it means to be unified, what it means to be divided, and what the night teaches us about silence, humility, and rest. There is no urgency here, no lesson to master, only a quiet story, unfolding slowly, meant to be a place where your thoughts can soften and your body can rest. As you listen, you do not need to follow every detail. You do not need to remember names or images. Let the words pass through you like distant voices carried on the night air. The story will remain, whether you hold it or not. For now, stay here, in this first still moment, where humanity once spoke with one voice, and the night was wide enough to hold them all. And slowly, gently, we continue. Blocked to the quiet confidence that slowly took root. As the days passed and the rhythm of building became woven into the fabric of daily life, something began to settle among the people that was deeper than enthusiasm and quieter than ambition. It was not loud confidence, and it was not urgency. It was a steady assurance, the kind that grows unnoticed when effort is repeated long enough without interruption. Each morning resembled the one before it. Hands reached for familiar tools. Feet walked the same paths. Voices rose with the same words, carrying instructions, encouragement, agreement, all understood without pause or resistance. This repetition created comfort. Comfort is powerful because it rarely announces itself. When actions flow smoothly and results follow predictably, Tao loses its voice. Questions feel unnecessary. Reflection feels optional. The tower did not rise suddenly, and because of that, it did not feel dangerous. It rose slowly layer upon layer, confirming the belief that this way of living was stable, reliable, and safe. The people did not gather each day to declare their pride. They gathered to continue, to add what had not yet been added, to finish what had already begun. Purpose does not always feel dramatic. Often, it feels like routine, and routine, when shared, becomes identity. As the tower grew taller, it began to shape how people perceive themselves. Height changes perspective quietly. From higher ground, the world below appears smaller, less complex, less threatening. Those who worked on the upper levels would look down and see the land spread out beneath them, wide and manageable, as though distance itself were a form of control. The higher they rose, the more the earth seemed something to be mastered rather than trusted. At night, when work paused and bodies rested, the presence of the tower remained. It did not sleep. It stood in silhouette against the dark sky, an unmoving form rising upward. visible even in low light. It became part of the night itself, a familiar shape that no longer demanded attention. People lay down beneath it, not questioning its purpose, not fearing its height, simply accepting it as part of the world they inhabited. This acceptance is important. What is questioned can be examined. What is accepted quietly becomes foundational. The tower began to feel inevitable, as though it had always been meant to exist. Its unfinished state did not feel temporary. It felt like a process that would naturally continue until completion, because nothing suggested otherwise. Language continued to flow without friction. The seas reinforced everything. When communication is effortless, agreement feels complete even when it is not. Words move quickly, meaning seems shared. There's little room for pause, little space for silence. Everything is understood quickly enough that deeper reflection never quite finds a place to settle. Plans were spoken and immediately acted upon. Corrections were made without conflict. Cooperation felt natural, almost automatic. And because of this, unity began to feel like certainty rather than gift. When something works consistently, it is easy to believe it will always work. The people spoke often of staying together, of not being scattered. These words were repeated so gently and so often that they no longer sounded like fear. They sounded like wisdom, like responsibility, like foresight. The desire to remain unified became the justification for the structure itself. The tower was no longer just something they were building. It was something that promised to hold them together. Fear does not always appear as alarm. Sometimes it appears as preparation, as strategy, as careful planning. The fear of being scattered did not feel like fear at all. It felt like prudence, like maturity, like learning from the past. And so it went, unquestioned. God observed all of this in silence, not with haste, not with reaction, but with clarity. The scriptures describe God seeing not just the tower, but the heart behind it, not the bricks, but the intention. He saw a unity built around self-preservation rather than trust, a togetherness rooted in avoiding vulnerability rather than embracing dependence. Still, nothing changed immediately. The days continued. The nights remained calm. The tower rose incrementally, so slowly that no one could point to a moment when it became too tall. When something grows without interruption, it rarely feels excessive. It simply feels normal. The night air remained quiet. Stars watched without comment. The people slept beneath the same sky, comforted by the sameness of each passing day. No warning appeared. No tension rose. Everything suggested continuity. And it is often in moments like these, when everything feels stable, predictable, and secure, that the most profound changes begin. Not as disruption, but as quiet adjustment beneath the surface. For now, remain here in this long season of calm effort. Let the repetition of work and rest slow your thoughts. Let the image of steady hands and shared voices fade into the background like distant memory. Nothing needs to be understood yet. Nothing needs to be anticipated. The night remains patient. The story continues without hurry. And slowly, gently, continue. Block 3. When unity slowly stopped listening. As the tower continued to rise, not in a single dramatic leap, but through countless ordinary days stacked gently on top of one another. Something inside the people began to change so quietly that no one would have been able to point to the exact moment it started. Nothing shattered. Nothing broke. No loud argument split the air. Voices still sounded familiar. Words still moved easily from mouth to ear. Meaning still seemed to land where it was intended. And yet, beneath the smooth surface of shared language, the nature of listening itself began to shift, as though a door that had once been open was now closing very slowly, without anyone noticing the sound. In the beginning, listening had been wide. People listened with openness, because they still expected to learn something from one another. They still assumed that a new thought could enter the room and be welcomed. They still knew, instinctively, that to be together required attention, patience, and the willingness to be changed by what someone else might say. But repetition has a quiet power. When the same work happens every day, and the same words guide that work, and the same results appear again and again, the mind begins to treat what is familiar as what is true. The body begins to treat what is predictable as what is safe. And over time, listening shifts from receiving to confirming. People stop listening to discover and start listening to agree, to continue, to keep the rhythm moving without interruption. This did not feel like pride at first. It felt like efficiency. It felt like harmony. It felt like relief. When everyone understands quickly, there is no need to pause. When there is no need to pause, there is no natural space where reflection can settle. When everything moves forward smoothly, hesitation feels like a problem, not a gift. The people did not begin to silence questions intentionally. Questions simply stopped forming, because the atmosphere no longer invited them. It is difficult for a question to survive in a room where the answer has already been assumed by momentum. And so, without anyone announcing it, the community began to trade openness for certainty, curiosity for alignment, listening for agreement. The tower itself became the center around which their attention revolved. It was no longer just something they were building. It became the way they measured their days, the way they defined progress, the way they interpreted their unity. Morning conversations naturally leaned toward what had been accomplished yesterday and what would be added today. Even the smallest details of life where people gathered, what routes they walked, how they planned risk quietly reorganized around the project. And the more life reorganized around it, the more inevitable it felt. Once something becomes inevitable, listening changes again. Because listening is no longer needed to decide direction. Direction has already been chosen. Language made this especially powerful, because everyone spoke the same words and understood them immediately. It felt as though everyone also shared the same depth of intention. But shared language can create the illusion of shared listening. Words can move quickly without reaching the deeper places they are supposed to reach. When communication is effortless, meaning can become shallow without anyone noticing. When there is no friction, there is little opportunity for humility. Friction is what slows us down long enough to notice what we are doing. Friction is what forces us to explain, to reconsider, to clarify, to check whether we are truly understood. In Babel, friction was absent. Everything moved too easily. And because it moved too easily, the people began to trust the movement more than the purpose behind it. There is a subtle difference between being united and being aligned. Unity can hold space for difference. Alignment often demands sameness. The people of Babel were becoming aligned, and alignment feels stable because it reduces complexity. When everyone is aligned, the world feels simpler, but simplicity can come at a cost. It can cost depth. It can cost listening. It can cost the quiet internal pause where the heart asks, is this the right direction? Over time, that internal pause became rarer, not because people were evil, but because the rhythm of success was constant. When results keep arriving, the mind interprets that as approval. And when the mind interprets it as approval, it stops listening for any other voice. At night, when the work paused and bodies lay down to rest, the tower remained present in the darkness like a silent thought that refused to leave. Even without sound, it shaped the atmosphere. Its outline against the stars made the night feel smaller, as though the sky had been claimed by what they were building. The city's quiet sounds, breathing, distant murmurs, a fire settling into embers existed beneath the tower's shadow. People who woke briefly in the night might have seen it there, still rising above their homes, still promising permanence, still suggesting security. And that suggestion quietly reinforced the same belief again and again. We are safe because we are together. We are together because we are building. We must keep building so we will never be scattered. The desire not to be scattered is, at its root, a desire not to be vulnerable. Scattering means uncertainty. It means losing the familiar. It means being unable to control what comes next. And so the tower was not only an act of ambition, but a response to fear. Yet the fear was not loud. It did not look like panic. It looked like planning. It looked like prudence. It looked like responsibility. People sighed gently and repeatedly that they needed to secure their future. They needed to make a name that would endure. They needed to build something that would guarantee they stayed together. These words were not shouted. They were shared like common sense, passed from person to person, until they sounded like simple truth rather than desire. And when a desire becomes truth, listening changes again. Because if something is true, why question it? Why pause? Why listen for a different voice? In the scriptures, God does not rush into this moment with chaos. He observes, he sees, and what he sees is not merely a tower reaching upward, but the inward turning of the human heart. He sees a unity that no longer has room for humility. He sees a togetherness built not upon trust in him, but upon the need to secure identity through human strength. He sees that the people are no longer listening upward, no longer receptive to being guided beyond themselves. The tower is not just tall, it is a symbol of a direction. The people have decided to rise on their own terms, to guarantee their own safety, to make their own name. And because they are unified, their power to do this is great. Unity is strong, but unity without listening becomes dangerous. Not because unity is evil, but because strength without humility becomes blind. What is most striking is how quiet this blindness can be. The people do not feel blind. They feel confident. They feel organized. They feel stable. They feel as though they have solved the problem of uncertainty. And the tower becomes proof. Each layer of brick becomes evidence that their plan works. Each day without scattering becomes confirmation that their strategy is wise. Listening is no longer necessary because the tower itself seems to answer every question. Want security? Build higher. Want identity? Build larger. Want to stay together? Keep building, and in this repetitive logic, the heart narrows. The sky above becomes less a mystery to reverence and more a target to reach. Heaven becomes a direction rather than a presence. As I went, on the very beauty of shared language began to work against deeper listening. People could coordinate quickly, so they did. They could persuade easily, so they did. They could motivate one another with familiar phrases, so they repeated them. Words began to serve momentum rather than truth. The same speeches, the same encouragement, the same reasoning passed around like a song everyone already knew. It was comforting. It was efficient. It was also closing the door to anything unexpected. When a community speaks with one voice, it can feel like peace. But sometimes it is simply the absence of interruption. Sometimes it is the quiet removal of space where God might have been heard. Heaven to mind, in such an environment, begins to change its habits. The mind learns to anticipate agreement. It stops preparing for difference. It stops practicing patience. It stops rehearsing the possibility that it might be wrong. And this is how listening fades. Not because people become cruel, but because they become certain. Certainty is a comfortable bed for the mind. It requires less effort than openness. It feels like rest, but it is not the same as peace. Peace can hold mystery. Certainty often cannot. At night, certainty can feel especially seductive. Darkness naturally brings questions, and questions can feel uncomfortable. A tower in the night feels like an answer. It stands there, visible, solid, measurable. It promises that the future is not unknown because something is being built against it. And so people slept beneath the tower with a kind of rest that was not truly surrender. But their bodies rested, but their hearts were still holding the project. Even in sleep, the tower remained a quiet anchor for identity. They did not have to look upward into the vastness and feel small. They could look at what they had built and feel strong, and so listening continued to thin. But the people did not notice because nothing seemed wrong. Work continued, days continued, nights continued. The tower rose. The city expanded, the language remained one. Everything appeared stable. There was no reason, from their perspective, to pause and ask whether the direction itself was wise. When a path is smooth, the feet assume it is right. When a plan succeeds, the heart assumes it is blessed. But God sees beyond smoothness and success. He sees the inward posture. He sees whether strength is rooted in humility or in self-sufficiency. The people's unity was real. Their cooperation was impressive. Their creativity was undeniable, but their listening had narrowed to themselves. They were no longer open to scattering, because scattering would require trust. They were no longer open to dependence, because dependence would require humility. The tower was, in a quiet way, an attempt to remove the need for God by replacing vulnerability with structure. And so the most gentle thing God could do was to interrupt not with destruction, but with a change that would loosen this closed unity and reopen space for humility again. This is why the story of Babel is not only about languages. It is about listening. It is about what happens when human voices become so unified that they stop being receptive. It is about how success can lull a community into believing that momentum is the same as truth. It is about how fear of vulnerability can masquerade as wisdom and planning. And it is about how God, who sees deeper than actions, addresses the heart by touching the place where unity had become closed. For now, we remain in this long, quiet season before the interruption. We stay with the image of steady hands, familiar voices, and a tower rising against the stars. We stay with a feeling of a community that believes it has secured its future, not by surrender, but by building. We stay with the gentle, almost invisible shift in listening, where openness becomes confirmation, and curiosity becomes agreement, and silence becomes rare. And as you rest here, listening to this story in the quiet of your own night, you do not need to analyze it. You do not need to judge it. You can simply let the imagery move slowly through you, like a calm wind across a wide plain. Let your thoughts soften. Let your breathing deepen without effort. Let the repetition of the story become soothing rather than demanding. Nothing is required of you. The night is patient. The tower is still rising in the distance. The voices are still one. The change has not yet arrived. And slowly, gently, we continue. Block 4, when silence lost its place. As unity continued to hold the people together, silence slowly began to lose its place among them. This did not happen because people spoke more loudly or more aggressively. It happened because silence was no longer needed. When everything moved in the same direction, when language flowed without resistance, when progress felt steady and unquestioned, silence became unnecessary. There was no reason to pause, no reason to wait, no reason to listen beyond what was already being said. In the early days, silence had been a shared space, a moment where people rested together, where thought could settle, where the night could stretch without demand. Silence had once been part of belonging, but as the tower grew and purpose became more narrowly defined, silence began to feel inefficient, empty, unproductive. Even when no one spoke, the direction was already decided. The work of tomorrow was already understood. Silence no longer invited reflection. It simply marked the pause between one repetition and the next. This shift was gentle, almost invisible. People still rested. They still slept. They still gathered quietly at night, but the quality of that quiet had changed. Silence was no longer a place where the heart listened. It had become a background, something to pass through rather than something to remain within. The night lost its mystery. It became merely the time when work stopped so that it could begin again. The tower stood through these nights as a constant presence, Even in darkness, it shaped attention. Its outline against the stars suggested direction, intention, certainty. It filled the silence with meaning without words. And because of this, the silence no longer felt open. It felt occupied. There was little room left for wonder, for humility. For the quiet question that asks, not what can be done, but whether it should be done. Silence is where vulnerability often surfaces. In silence, the mind encounters uncertainty. In silence, the heart feels small. In silence, the need for trust becomes visible. But the people of Babel had learned to fill silence with structure. The towers stood as an answer before the question could fully form. Whenever uncertainty threatened to surface, the presence of what they were building reassured them. There was no need to sit with not knowing when something so visible promised control. Over time, even the internal silence within each person began to change. Thoughts moved quickly toward familiar conclusions. Doubts dissolved before reaching awareness. The inner voice that once hesitated learned to quiet itself, not through force, but through habit. When hesitation is never rewarded, it slowly stops appearing. The mind adapts to what the environment allows. Language continued to reinforce this. Familiar phrases circulated through the community, repeated often enough to feel foundational. Words about strength, togetherness, legacy, permanence, safety. These words filled the spaces where silence might have deepened. They were comforting, predictable, and because they were shared by everyone, they felt unquestionably true. God observed this as well. He saw not only the absence of silence, but what that absence revealed. He saw that the people no longer needed silence because they no longer expected to hear anything beyond themselves. Their unity had become self-sustaining. Their purpose, silence had lost its role because humility had quietly faded with it. Night after night passed without disruption. The sky remained vast, unchanged, uninterested in the tower's growth. The stars did not draw closer. The heavens did not respond, but fewer eyes lifted upward. Attention remained anchored to what could be measured, counted, completed. The infinite was replaced by the achievable. Mystery was replaced by certainty. Silence, when it did appear, felt different now. It felt like waiting rather than listening. Waiting for morning, waiting for work, waiting for a continuation. Silence had become empty of expectation, and when silence becomes empty, it loses its power to transform. This is how a community can remain calm while slowly closing itself off. There was no unrest in Babel, no tension, no anxiety. Everything felt orderly, but order without listening becomes rigid. It becomes fragile in ways that are not immediately visible. Strength accumulates, momentum builds, and yet flexibility diminishes. The people did not notice this loss. Why would they? Nothing felt wrong. Progress continued. Cooperation remained strong. Language still united them. Silence simply felt less important than it once had. And in a world where nothing appears broken, silence rarely calls attention to itself when it leaves. For now, we stay here in this long season where silence has thinned, where words circulate icily, where purpose feels settled and secure. Let this atmosphere move slowly through you. Let the repetition of certainty soften your thoughts. Let the image of the tower standing through the quiet night become distant and calm. Nothing needs to be anticipated yet. Nothing needs to be resolved. The night remains steady. The city rests. The tower stands. And slowly, gently, we continue. Block 5. When progress became a gentle addiction. As the tower continued to rise through days that felt increasingly alike, progress itself began to take on a quiet emotional weight. It was no longer simply something that happened as a result of work. It became something that was felt, something expected. Something that gently reassured the people each time they saw another layer completed. Progress is comforting when it is visible. It gives the impression that time is being used correctly, that effort is justified, that the future is being secured piece by piece. Each new level of the tower confirmed the same silent message. What we are doing works, and when something appears to work consistently, the mind begins to relax. Its vigilance, doubt feels unnecessary. Reflection feels optional. The people did not need to tell themselves that progress was good. They could see it. They could touch it. They could measure it. And because it was shared by everyone, progress became a collective reassurance, a calm agreement that no further questioning was needed. This is how progress becomes addictive, not in a dramatic or destructive way, but in a gentle, almost soothing way. Each small success releases tension. Each completed section brings a sense of order. Each day that ends with more built than before quiets the part of the mind that wonders whether the direction itself is right. Progress answers questions before they are fully asked. The people of Babel did not feel rushed. They did not feel pressured. They felt steady. There was always something to do tomorrow, and that something was already understood. This predictability gave shape to time. Days flowed into one another with little friction. The future did not feel unknown because it was already planned. Tomorrow looked very much like today, only higher. At night, this feeling followed them into rest. Sleep came easily when progress had been made. Bodies relaxed, knowing that the work was moving forward. The tower stood as evidence that the day had mattered. Even in darkness, its presence reassured them that nothing was being wasted. Rest felt earned, and earned rest carries a different quality than surrendered rest. It is calm, but it is still connected to effort. Over time, the need for progress quietly replaced the need for meaning. Meaning became embedded in continuation. As long as the tower was rising, life felt purposeful. There was no need to ask deeper questions because the visible structure provided a constant answer. The people did not ask, "Why are we building?" as often because the act of building itself had become the reason. Language reinforced this gently. Familiar phrases circulated without challenge. Words about legacy, permanence, strength, unity. These words did not provoke thought. They soothed it. They wrapped progress in reassurance. And because everyone spoke them, they felt undeniable. When an idea is repeated often enough without resistance, it begins to feel like reality itself. God observed this with clarity. He saw that progress had become more than a result. It had become a source of emotional security. The people were no longer trusting him to hold their future. They were trusting momentum. They were trusting visible achievement. They were trusting the comfort that comes from doing something measurable rather than resting in something unseen. Progress has a subtle power to narrow attention. When forward movement feels good, the heart becomes reluctant to stop. Stopping feels like loss. Pausing feels like danger. Silence feels like waste. The people did not fear God. They simply did not feel the need to wait on him. Waiting had been replaced by building. Trust had been replaced by continuation. This shift was not aggressive. It was quiet, gentle, almost reasonable. The tower did not feel like rebellion. It felt like responsibility, like learning from the past, like ensuring that what had once been fragile would now be secure. The desire not to be scattered felt wise, and wisdom, when detached from humility, can quietly become self. As nights passed, the tower grew more familiar than the sky. People looked upward and saw what they had made before they noticed the stars. The heavens became background. The structure became foreground. Mystery slowly lost its pull when certainty stood so clearly in front of them. Even the body began to associate peace with progress. When work advanced, the body relaxed. When progress slowed, rest felt uneasy. This association tied inner calm to outer achievement. And when calm depends on achievement, rest can never fully deepen. Something must always continue. God saw that the people were no longer resting in him. They were resting in movement. They were soothed by the feeling that something was always being accomplished. This kind of rest is fragile. It holds only as long as progress continues. It cannot survive interruption. Yet, at this point, there was no interruption. The nights remained quiet. The days remained productive. The tower continued to rise. Everything appeared stable, and stability, when unchallenged, can feel like permanence. For now, remain here in this long season where progress feels gentle and reassuring, where effort soothes the mind, where repetition creates comfort, and where the tower quietly stands as proof that nothing needs to change. Let the rhythm of steady building slow your thoughts. Let the image of consistent progress become distant and calm. Nothing needs to be judged yet. Nothing needs to be questioned. The night is still, the city rests, the tower rises, and slowly, gently, we continue. Block 6. When effort quietly replaced trust, as the tower continued to rise without interruption, the people slowly entered a season where effort itself became the place of rest. This did not happen abruptly, and it did not feel like a loss. On the contrary, it felt reassuring. Each day began with familiar movement, familiar coordination, familiar purpose. Hands reached for the same materials. Voices carried the same instructions. Bodies followed rhythms that no longer required thought. The predictability of effort brought a sense of calm, and that calm began to settle deeper than anyone realized. Effort has a way of soothing the mind when it produces visible results. When something grows steadily before your eyes, it suggests that time is being handled correctly, that nothing is being wasted, that the future is being shaped rather than awaited. The people of Babel did not think of themselves as replacing trust. They believed they were honoring responsibility. They believed they were doing what was necessary to ensure stability, to protect unity, to prevent the pain of scattering from ever returning. Their hands were busy, and busy hands rarely feel vulnerable. As effort repeated itself day after day, the body began to associate movement with safety. When work progressed, muscles relaxed more tight. When bricks stacked higher, breathing felt calmer. When the tower stood taller in the evening light, the day felt complete. This association quietly rewired the inner sense of peace. Rest no longer came from surrender. It came from continuation. Peace was no longer received. It was earned. This kind of peace does not feel anxious. It feels organized. It feels responsible. It feels mature. But it is also fragile, because it depends on things continuing exactly as expected. The people did not notice this fragility, because nothing had challenged it yet. Every day resembled the one before. The weather cooperated. The language unified. The work advanced, and so effort continued to feel like wisdom rather than control. Trust, in its deepest sense, requires the willingness to pause without proof. It asks the heart to remain open even when outcomes are uncertain. But uncertainty had little place in Babel now. The tower reduced uncertainty by turning the future into a project. As long as the tower was rising, the future felt manageable. There was no need to wait, no need to listen, no need to remain still long enough for questions to surface. God observed this shift with clarity and patience. He saw that the people were no longer resting in him. Not because they had rejected him, but because they had found something else that quieted the same fears. The fear of being scattered, the fear of being small, the fear of losing identity. Effort had become the answer to those fears, and because the answer appeared to work, it felt sufficient. At night, this change revealed itself in subtle ways. Sleep came quickly, but it was a sleep anchored in accomplishment. Bodies relaxed because progress had been made. Minds softened because something tangible stood as evidence that the day had mattered. The tower, still visible in the darkness, continued to speak silently even while people slept. It told them that tomorrow was already planned, that direction was already set, that nothing would be lost as long as building resumed. This kind of rest is shallow, though it does not feel restless. It is calm on the surface but remains tied to effort beneath. The heart does not fully release. It simply pauses. The night becomes an intermission rather than a surrender. And because of this, effort quietly follows people even into sleep. The tower remains present in dreams, in expectation, in the sense that something must always continue. Language supported this internal shift. Words like responsibility, foresight, strength, permanence, and wisdom circulated gently through the community. These words framed effort as virtue and continuation as faithfulness. Waiting began to feel passive. Stillness began to feel unproductive. Silence began to feel unnecessary. When language reshapes values, the heart follows without resistance. The people did not feel exhausted by their work. They felt affirmed by it. Each layer added to the tower reinforced the belief that they were doing something meaningful, something lasting. Effort became identity. To build was not just a work, it was to belong. And when effort becomes identity, stopping feels like loss, even if the body longs for rest. God saw that trust had not disappeared entirely. It had simply been displaced. It had moved from the unseen to the visible. From dependence to capability, from surrender to structure. The people trusted what they could measure. They trusted what they could control. They trusted the height of the tower more than the mystery of heaven. The nights remained quiet and uninterrupted. No sign appeared to challenge this exchange. No voice interrupted the rhythm. The city rested peacefully, believing itself secure. And yet, beneath this peace, something essential had narrowed. Trust had become conditional. It depended on effort continuing. It depended on progress remaining visible. It depended on tomorrow looking like today. As you listen to this slow unfolding, there is nothing you need to judge or fix. This is not a story of sudden failure, but of gradual replacement, of how something good can quietly take the place of something deeper, of how effort, when left unexamined, can slowly occupy the space where trust once lived. We remain here in this long season where effort feels comforting, where progress reassures the heart, where the tower continues to rise without challenge, and where trust, though still spoken of, is no longer the place where rest truly comes from. The night holds this moment gently, allowing it to linger without resolution, just as the people themselves remain unaware that anything has shifted. And so the story continues, unhurried, carried by repetition and quiet confidence, waiting for the moment when effort will no longer be enough to hold everything together. Block 7. When control slowly became the shape of peace, as the tower continued its steady ascent, rising not as a sudden declaration but as a daily confirmation of human capability, the sense of control within the people grew quietly stronger. Control did not arrive as tension or force. It arrived as reassurance. It felt like calm organization. It felt like foresight. It felt like the gentle relief that comes when life appears predictable enough to be managed. The people did not feel that they were tightening their grip on the future. They felt that they were finally holding it securely. Each day unfolded with remarkable similarity to the one before. Materials were prepared. Tasks were assigned. Movements were coordinated. Voices carried familiar instructions that needed no repetition. This consistency shaped the nervous system of the community itself. When days repeat without disruption, the body learns to relax inside the repetition. Muscles soften, breathing deepens. The heart interprets sameness as safety, and slowly, without anyone noticing, control begins to feel like peace. Control offered answers before questions could fully form. When uncertainty tried to rise, The tower stood as a response. When fear whispered about scattering, separation, or loss, the structure answered with heightened permanence. The people did not need to imagine the future. They could see it being built in front of them. The visible replaced the unseen. The measurable replaced the mysterious. And because the visible continued to grow, trust in what could be controlled deepened naturally. This trust reshaped how people related to God. God was not denied. He was simply no longer central to the sense of safety. Safety had become structural. It lived in systems, in cooperation, in planning, in repetition. God remained present in language and memory, but dependence on him faded as reliance on control increased. The heart does not abandon trust abruptly. It relocates it. And in Babel, trust relocated from heaven to human order. At night, this shift expressed itself in the quality of rest. Sleep came easily, but it was a sleep anchored in certainty rather than surrender. Bodies rested because the day had followed its plan. Minds softened because tomorrow already felt known. There was no need to lie awake listening for danger when everything had been accounted for. Control had replaced watchfulness. Planning had replaced prayer. And peace had taken the shape of predictability. The tower stood through the night as a quiet guardian of this peace. Even in darkness, it reassured. Its silhouette against the stars suggested that nothing important was hidden anymore. What mattered could be seen, measured, continued. Mystery lost its pull when certainty stood so clearly in front of the eyes. The heavens above no longer invited waiting. They invited reaching. God's presence became distant, not because it withdrew, but because it was no longer needed to calm fear. Control also reshaped listening. When safety is believed to come from order, voices that introduce uncertainty feel disruptive. Hesitation feels inefficient. Waiting feels wasteful. Silence feels uncomfortable. And so the people learn to fill silence quickly, not with noise, but with continuation. The next task, the next layer. The next plan. Control thrives in motion. It prefers progress to pause. This control did not feel heavy or oppressive. It felt kind. It felt like protection. The people believed they were caring for one another by maintaining order. They believed they were preventing harm by ensuring unity. They believed they were acting wisely by building something that could not be taken away. And because these beliefs were reinforced daily by visible success, they hardened gently into certainty. Certainty has a soothing effect on the human heart. It reduces the need to feel small. It reduces the need to wait. It reduces the discomfort of not knowing. In Babel, certainty wrapped itself around the community like a blanket. Warm, familiar, comforting. But like any blanket, it also reduced awareness of what lay beyond it. The people no longer felt exposed beneath the sky. They felt sheltered beneath their own creation. God observed this not as an interruption, but as a development. He saw that control had become the new refuge. He saw that peace had been redefined. Peace was no longer the quiet confidence that comes from trust in Him. It was the calm that comes from believing that everything important is already managed. This peace was real, but it was shallow. It rested on conditions. It required continuity. It could not survive disruption. The longer control went unchallenged, the more invisible it became. The people did not think of themselves as controlling their future. They believed they were simply being responsible. Responsibility became the language that justified everything. Responsibility to remain together. Responsibility to build higher. Responsibility to prevent scattering. And responsibility, when disconnected from humility, slowly replaces listening with certainty. As nights passed in steady repetition, the people slept believing themselves secure. Nothing disturbed them. No sign warned them. No conflict arose. The calm of control felt complete, but beneath this calm, flexibility had narrowed. The heart had closed itself around what it already knew. The capacity to be interrupted had weakened. The ability to release control had thinned. Control feels strongest right before it is tested. It feels most convincing when nothing contradicts it. And so we remain here, in this long, quiet season, where control feels indistinguishable from peace, where order feels like safety, where the tower continues to rise, and the night remains undisturbed. The story has not yet shifted. The interruption has not yet arrived. Everything still feels held. As you rest within this part of the story, there's nothing you need to analyze. Let the repetition slow your thoughts. Let the image of steady planning and familiar certainty drift gently through your awareness. This is not a moment of conflict. It is a moment of deepening. The night carries it patiently, allowing the meaning to settle without force. The tower stands. The people rest. Control feels like peace, and the story continues quietly, moving forward without haste, just as the night itself continues to hold you. Block 8. As the tower continued to rise, reaching higher into the open sky with each passing season, something fundamental began to change in how the people understood meaning itself. Meaning no longer lived primarily in shared presence, in relationship, or in quiet dependence. It began to settle into what could be seen, what could be measured. Confirmed by distance and height, the tower did not simply occupy space, it quietly redefined value. Each new level did more than alter the horizon. It reshaped the inner compass by which worth, success, and purpose were felt. In earlier days, meaning had been something sensed inwardly. It was found in belonging, in continuity of life, in the shared rhythm of existence beneath the same sky. But as the tower grew taller, meaning began to migrate outward. It took on a physical form, a visible scale, a way to point and say, without words, this is why we matter. The higher the structure climbed, the more convincing this message became. Purpose felt stronger when it could be observed from far away. Height carries a powerful psychological pull. To rise physically creates the impression of rising above uncertainty itself. From higher ground, the world appears smaller, more manageable, less threatening. Those who labored on the upper levels of the tower looked down upon the land and felt a subtle shift within themselves. The earth seemed subdued. Distance created the illusion of mastery. Complexity softened into shapes that felt controllable. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, the belief settled that height itself was proof of significance. This belief did not need to be spoken aloud. It was reinforced daily through repetition. Each time the tower became visible from farther away, meaning felt confirmed. Each time travelers approached the city and saw the structure rising above the plain, admiration flowed naturally. The people did not need praise from one another. The tower received it silently on their behalf. It stood as a witness to human coordination, endurance, and ambition. It answered the question of worth without requiring reflection. At night, this shift became even more pronounced. In the darkness, when details faded and shapes softened, the tower remained unmistakable. Its outline cut into the night sky, separating itself from the stars. Fires burned low. Voices quieted. Bodies lay down to rest. And still the tower stood, visible even when the world around it dissolved into shadow. In those hours, it did not simply represent work completed. It represented meaning secured. It suggested that even when people slept, their purpose remained upright and intact. The night sky, once a place of vastness and humility, slowly became a backdrop. The heavens no longer drew the eye upward with the same sense of wonder. Attention was anchored to what rose from the ground, rather than what stretched infinitely above it. Mystery lost weight when something concrete stood so prominently in front of it. The people did not stop believing in God, but their sense of meaning no longer depended on Him in the same way. Meaning had become measurable. God observed this relocation of meaning with clarity. He saw that the people were no longer defining themselves by relationship, but by reach. Identity was being shaped not by listening or dependence, but by visibility and permanence. The tower was not merely an object. It had become a mirror. In it, the people saw their strength, their unity, their capacity to endure beyond individual lives. And because that reflection felt reassuring, it became central. Language adjusts itself around this new center of gravity. Words of admiration, affirmation, and accomplishments circulated freely. Phrases that praised ingenuity and collective strength became common and unquestioned. These words did not challenge the heart. They reinforced it. They framed height as virtue and endurance as fulfillment. When language aligns with achievement, meaning follows naturally, without resistance. Silence, too, changed its role once again. Silence was no longer a space for listening upward. It became a moment of observation, a time to look, to admire, to feel the reassurance of something standing firm. The night no longer invited smallness. It invited confirmation. The people rested beneath the tower, not feeling exposed beneath the vast sky, but sheltered beneath their own creation. The body responded to this shift in subtle ways. Calm became associated with visibility. Peace was felt most strongly when the tower stood clearly against the horizon. When meaning can be seen, the nervous system relaxes. There is less need to trust what cannot be confirmed. The heart settles into what feels solid. And so the people slept with a sense of fulfillment that did not come from surrender, but from assurance. God saw that meaning measured by height would eventually demand more height to sustain itself. What begins as reassurance slowly becomes a requirement. Once meaning depends on visibility, it must always remain visible. Once purpose is tied to achievement, it must always be achieved again. This kind of meaning is restless. Though it feels calm at first, it cannot survive stillness. It cannot tolerate completion. It always needs another layer. Yet God did not interrupt immediately. He allowed meaning to deepen, to solidify, to become unmistakable in its form. Only when something reveals its full shape can it be gently undone. The tower needed to stand tall enough that its meaning was clear not only to the people, but to history itself. Night after night passed without disturbance. Sleep came easily. Dreams were steady. The tower remained. The people rested beneath the belief that they had secured their place in the world, that they had built something that answered the ancient human longing to endure, to be seen, to rise beyond the limits of time and vulnerability. As you rest within this part of the story, allow the image of the tower stretching upward into the dark to soften and slow within your awareness. There is no need to follow every thought. No need to hold meaning tightly. The narrative is not asking for understanding. It is offering atmosphere. Let repetition quiet the mind. Let the sense of height dissolve gently into stillness. We remain in this long moment before change, where meaning feels stable, where identity feels secured by human hands, where the tower stands tall against the night, and where nothing yet challenges the belief that purpose has been fully claimed. The story continues without urgency, unfolding at the pace of deep night, just as your own awareness is free to drift, unhurried, held by the same steady rhythm. Block 9, when division unfolded like a quiet night wind. When the change finally began, it did not arrive with force or spectacle, and it did not interrupt the day in any visible way. The tower still stood as it had the night before, unfinished but imposing, rising above the plain with the same quiet authority. The city still moved through its familiar rhythms. Fires were lit, tools were gathered, voices carried across the open space as work resumed. And yet, within this ordinary continuation, something subtle shifted, not in stone or structure, but in the invisible space where understanding had always lived. At first, the people noticed only small irregularities that felt easy to dismiss. A word spoken that did not land as expected. A sentence that seemed clear to the speaker but returned an uncertain expression from the listener. An instruction that required repetition, then clarification. These moments did not cause alarm. They caused pause. A brief hesitation where ease had once been immediate. Communication, which had always flowed without resistance, now required attention. Voices still sounded familiar. Faces were unchanged. Gestures carried the same intentions as before, but meaning no longer traveled effortlessly between minds. The people assumed this was temporary. They tried again, speaking more slowly, choosing different words, repeating themselves with patience. They believed understanding would return if they simply made a little more effort, because effort had always worked before. Confusion does not begin as chaos. It begins as work, the work of explaining what once needed no explanation, the work of clarifying what had always been understood, the work of realizing, slowly and reluctantly, that shared language can no longer be assumed. This work carried a quiet fatigue with it, not of the body, but of the mind, and that fatigue softened the certainty that had sustained the people for so long. As these moments multiplied throughout the day, coordination began to slow, not because anyone refused to cooperate, but because cooperation now demanded focus. Each exchange required presence. Each task carried the risk of misunderstanding. The shared rhythm that had once moved everyone forward with ease began to fracture into smaller, uneven patterns. Work continued, but without the same fluidity, as though the current that had carried them together had weakened. The tower itself did not change during this time. Its stones remained where they were. Its height did not increase. The structure stood exactly as it had, but the ability to move together within it had shifted. What had once been a single motion shared by many hands became several motions unfolding side by side, no longer synchronized. People began to gravitate instinctively toward those they could understand most easily. This movement was not deliberate and not hostile. Understanding felt like relief. Familiar sounds felt like safety. Conversations clustered naturally. Small groups formed quietly, without announcement or intention. The city began to reorganize itself along lines of comprehension rather than purpose. No one named this separation yet. It did not feel like division. It felt like adjustment, like a necessary response to something that had quietly changed. The people were still calm, still orderly, still trying to continue what they had begun. But beneath that calm, the unity that had once required no effort now demanded constant attention. As evening approached and the light softened, the sense of strain lingered in the air. Voices carried differently. Conversations ended sooner. The day closed without resolution, leaving a subtle awareness that something essential was no longer stable, even if no one could yet say what it was. The night arrived gently, as it always had, settling over the city without judgment. And within that night, the change continued its quiet work, preparing the way for a separation that had not yet become visible, but had already begun to take shape. As the night settled fully over the city, the subtle change that had begun during the day continued its quiet work. People gathered less in large groups and more in small clusters, drawn instinctively toward familiar sounds and recognizable patterns of speech. There was no announcement of division, no decision made aloud. It unfolded naturally, like water finding separate paths when the ground beneath it shifts. Understanding became precious, and where understanding was found, people lingered. The next days followed a similar pattern. Effort continued, but coordination required more time. Instructions were simplified. Tasks were divided differently. People worked alongside those they could communicate with most easily. Not out of rejection, but out of necessity. Language, once invisible, now shaped every movement. It determined who worked together, who traveled together, who rested together. Unity did not break suddenly. It thinned, stretching into smaller forms that could still hold meaning. The tower remained unfinished as this happened. Its presence was unchanged, yet its role diminished. It no longer gathered everyone toward a single purpose. It stood as something remembered rather than something lived. Attention shifted away from height and toward direction. People began to look outward rather than upward, considering where they might go, who they might follow, how they might continue elsewhere. God's intervention did not arrive as destruction. It arrived its release. By touching language, he loosened a unity that had become too tight, too inward, too dependent on control. The people had built to avoid scattering, believing scattering meant loss. God revealed that scattering could also mean expansion. What felt like division was, in truth, an opening. Families gathered their belongings. Small groups chose paths without ceremony. Movement replaced permanence. The city slowly emptied, not in chaos, but in quiet resolve. The tower stood behind them, unfinished and silent, no longer commanding devotion. It became a marker of a season that had ended. At night, as people slept in new places beneath unfamiliar skies, the world felt wider. Voices sounded different. Silence returned in new forms. The sameness that had once defined safety gave way to variety, to difference, to distance. Humanity carried its many languages into the earth, and the earth became more complex, more challenging, and more alive. There was no hatred in this separation, no war, no accusation. Division arrived without anger because it was not meant to destroy, but to soften what had hardened. God did not erase human effort. He redirected human dependence. Meaning was no longer measured by height, but by movement. Identity was no longer secured by sameness, but shaped through journey. For the night listener, this part of the story is not a moment of collapse, but of gentle release. The pressure to remain unified through control has eased. The need to rise has been interrupted. The world opens outward, wide and quiet, inviting rest without demand. As this story settles, there is nothing you need to resolve or hold together. The separation has already unfolded. The tension has already loosened. The night holds the movement softly, just as it holds you now, allowing awareness to drift naturally while the story continues its slow, steady breathing beneath the same patient sky. Block 10. When humanity learned to rest in smallness, after the movement outward had begun, and the great effort of remaining unified through height had quietly released its grip, humanity entered a different kind of night. It was not a night defined by one city, one structure, or one shared voice. It was a night scattered across many places, many paths, many skies. Fires burned in new lands. People lay down on unfamiliar ground. The world felt larger now, not because something had been added, but because something heavy had been set down. Without the tower dominating the horizon, the sky slowly returned to its old role. Stars felt distant again. Darkness felt open rather than contained. The sense of being small beneath something vast returned. Not as fear, but as balance. Humanity no longer stood beneath its own creation trying to reach the heavens. It rested beneath the heavens once more, learning again what it meant to be held rather than elevated. This smallness did not feel like loss. At first, it felt unfamiliar. The certainty that had come from shared structure was gone. The reassurance of height was no longer available. People could not look up and see proof that everything was under control. Instead, they had to listen, to observe, to adapt. Life no longer moved in one direction with one rhythm. It unfolded slowly, differently, in many places at once. In this scattering, something gentle returned to the human heart. Dependence, not as weakness, but as relationship. Without a single structure to rely on, people learned again to rely on one another in smaller ways. Families mattered more. Voices mattered more. Presence mattered more. Meaning was no longer carried by something towering above them, but by what moved beside them. At night, this change became especially clear. Sleep did not come beneath a monument anymore. It came beneath open sky, beneath trees, beneath unfamiliar constellations. The body learned to rest without the reassurance of permanence. The mind learned to soften without the comfort of certainty. Trust returned quietly, not as an idea but as necessity. God's presence, which had never truly left, came nearer again, not because he moved closer, but because there was space to notice him. Without the tower pulling attention upward through ambition, the heart could lift its gaze in humility instead. Heaven was no longer a destination to reach, it was a presence to rest beneath. Humanity learned, slowly, that greatness was never meant to be held through height. It was meant to be carried through humility. The attempt to rise together had created tension. The invitation to scatter created room. Room to breathe, room to listen, room to sleep without striving. The tower, standing unfinished in the distance of memory, no longer needed to be judged or condemned. It became a quiet lesson rather than a warning, a reminder that effort cannot replace surrender, and that unity cannot survive without listening. Its silence spoke more gently than its height ever had. As generations passed and languages multiplied, the night grew rich with difference. Different prayers, different songs, different stories, told beside different fires. And within that diversity, humanity found a deeper rest than it had ever known beneath sameness. Rest, not in control, but in trust. Not in achievement, but in belonging. For the night listener, this final movement is an invitation rather than a conclusion. An invitation to release the need to rise, to prove, to secure meaning through effort. The story does not ask you to become smaller. It invites you to remember that you already are, and that smallness was never meant to be unsafe. As you lie here now, beneath your own quiet sky, there is nothing you need to build, nothing you need to reach, nothing you need to hold together. The tower has gone silent. The night has widened, and rest no longer depends on height, but on being held. As the nights continue to pass in many places at once, humanity slowly adjusted to a different relationship with time, without a single center pulling attention upward. Days no longer felt like steps toward a towering goal. They became cycles again. Mornings arrived, work was done, evenings settled, and night returned without demanding proof of progress. Life softened into rhythm rather than direction. The body responded to this change before the mind did, relaxing into patterns that did not require constant anticipation. In smaller communities, voices became more distinct and more meaningful. Words mattered because they were no longer guaranteed to be understood by everyone. Listening returned as a necessity. Silence regained its place as something valuable rather than empty. In the absence of a structure that promised permanence, people learned to rest in what was immediate and real. A sared mil, a familiar voice, the warmth of fire against the dark. These things carried meaning again, not because they lasted forever, but because they were present. At night, the sense of being held changed shape. The sky felt larger, but less demanding. Stars did not need to be reached or measured. They simply existed, distant and steady. Darkness no longer pressed inward as something to be conquered. It opened outward as space. Space where thoughts could slow. Space where the body could settle without effort. Space where the heart no longer needed to secure itself through control. God's presence moved through this widened night quietly, not as a force that interrupted, but as a steadiness that remained. Without the noise of ambition and the weight of collective striving, his nearness became easier to sense. It did not arrive with instruction or correction. It arrived as permission to stop building. Permission to stop proving. Permission to rest without fear of losing meaning. Humanity began to remember something ancient, something that had existed before towers and cities and shared ambition. That rest was not a reward for effort, but a condition of being held. That smallness was not a flaw, but a place of safety. That dependence was not weakness, but relationship. These memories did not return all at once. They settled slowly, generation by generation, night by night. The silence of the unfinished tower became part of the world's background. No longer loud enough to shape identity, it stood as a quiet witness to a season when humans tried to carry meaning upward, and as a reminder that meaning had always been meant to be carried inward. Its stillness spoke more gently than its height ever had. As languages spread and paths diverged, humanity's story grew wider rather than taller. Different nights held different prayers. Different skies watched over different dreams, and within this diversity, rest became deeper. There was no single voice to maintain, no single structure to protect. The pressure of sameness dissolved, replaced by the quiet work of living. For the night listener, this final movement is not an ending that asks for attention. It is a settling, a slow exhale, a return to scale. The story does not close with instruction or demand. It simply rests beside you, offering the same permission it offered humanity long ago. You do not need to rise. You do not need to reach. You do not need to secure meaning through effort. The tower is silent now. The night is wide. And rest is no longer something to achieve, but something already waiting, steady and sufficient, holding you gently as awareness drifts and the story fades into quiet beneath the same patient sky.